All right, guys, it's Q. Welcome back to another episode of The Ride. Thank you to those who have been tuning in throughout the fall to some of these conversations. I've been getting some great feedback. Quick note, we will not have an episode release next week. We're going to get back to that regularly scheduled Monday releases. I do like trying to get these to you on Monday, even though we've had a couple that have been coming out Tuesday and now Wednesday with this episode. So no episode next week, but the following week we'll be restarting that kind of Monday release schedule. So appreciate you guys again for tuning in throughout the fall. If you can, really quick, just take a moment and rate us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or like on YouTube. I'm trying to grow this channel, trying to see what we can do together. And obviously the support from your end goes a long way on that front. Now, today's conversation is with Coach Elliot Bender, also known as the Box Lacrosse Guy on social media. I actually was able to connect with Elliot through his Instagram page, where he offers a ton of different resources on the box game, specifically player development, mentorship. He's talking about schemes, all of these things that, were a big chunk of our conversation and how we transition that into the field game. And Elliot has a wealth of knowledge, both as a player in box, playing at a very high level, as well as coaching both box and field. He was coaching with the U.S. Box Lacrosse Association for 8 years. He won a couple field championships in high school there in California, as well as being the women's assistant coach at University of Alabama, Huntsville. Now, with that variety of experience, we touched on a ton of different topics, including shooting, spacing, the two-man game, substitution, and transition, and how we take those techniques and blend them into the field game to make better players and better teams. So really awesome conversation. As always, hopefully you find some value in it and enjoy the ride. All right, Coach Bender, welcome to the show. I really want to start off with this. You are the Box Lacrosse Guy on Instagram. That is your actual profile. So I made the mistake of saying, hey, how's the weather up in Canada and all that stuff? And you're right in my neck of the woods, man. You're like a couple states over from me. So, how's the weather up in Tennessee today, man? How you doing?
It's good, man. I'm doing good. The weather's been a little cold. It's been flurrying, but the snow hasn't been sticking. So it's okay, but man, it's like we're not used to this weather here being this cold in November. So hopefully we get it out of the way early. We have a nice spring lacrosse season, but you never know.
Well, lucky in box, you're indoors. That's another benefit there. Right before the episode started, we got to talking just a little bit, and without bringing up too much, you've got some connections to the box lacrosse growth in the U.S., right? And I'd love to start the conversation there. I wasn't a box player myself. I know it's becoming more popular in the U.S., and I just want to know what your thoughts are on how that growth is going and what U.S. lacrosse is doing to make that happen and all that.
Yeah. So I have some really big connections with, kind of box lacrosse, and I honestly just kind of fell into them. There's no other way to describe it. So I, kind of watched U.S. Box Lacrosse, the association build because I was Shaden Santos's right-hand guy who is still the president. Him and Matt Brown, University of Denver, kind of started this thing. But because Brownie's so involved with, NCAA stuff, he did a ton with U.S. Boxla, but Shaden was kind of more like ground running, pushing this thing, and Matt Brown was like the heavy that came in and helped facilitate this. They both did a really, really good job growing it. But I worked with Shaden specifically, so I saw that side a lot more. I did a ton with Matt Brown. I coached some tournaments for them and et cetera when I wasn't doing Calilac stuff. But yeah, I kind of watched it grow. I started right when Shaden started in 2009, 10, and have been kind of doing this thing ever since and been a believer in box, and it's, been pretty awesome.
Yeah, I want to talk about that growth, but real quick on Matt Brown. He's such a fantastic coach in his own right. What makes him a great coach, you think, just from being around him and seeing, how he teaches the game?
Yeah, he's a truly phenomenal coach, both field and box. He can kind of do it all. I would imagine he can coach most sports. Just he's so detail-oriented, and that's the thing I've always tried to take away from Brownie, is that he's just organized. There's no other way to put it. Like his practice plans are very detailed, and for box, kind of adding those details is a little tough. So seeing what he was doing with box, and then only imagining how much detail he's putting into field lacrosse really challenged me to become a better coach and be more organized, more consistent with my practice planning, language, everything. He's really, really good there in that organization category. And I think it just filters onto the field. You see it.
Awesome. I connect with a lot of my guests via Instagram, man, and you're talking about how you got involved with the box game a decade plus ago, and now growing your account. That's how I was able to find you, and I love meeting new people through that kind of medium and seeing what they're all about. So what are you kind of doing with the Lacrosse Guy profile, and how are you trying to grow via that way, and then how does it kind of tie in to your work with US Lacrosse Box?
Yeah, so I'm not doing a ton with US Boxel right now, but so I'm kind of just growing this like little individual channel. Like I said, I think Shaden's going to be coming into town this weekend, so we're going to hang out and we'll talk a little bit more and see if there might be some ways to spin it. But the big thing with my account is creating awareness, and so specifically, I've gone around to so many men's events and played, and I see guys that grew up playing field lacrosse. They're post-collegiate now, and they start playing box, and they realize, man, this is fun. This is such a great way to play this game. But you see splits down the alley, and you see them, not playing good defense and like slashing rather than cross-checking. And my genuine belief is that these guys are just doing it because that's what they know, and they're just going to stick with what they know. And if they knew a different way, they would do it a different way. And I think there's just not really like an easy way to get those concepts out to people because it's such a different format of the game. So figuring out how to be that bridge to field lacrosse to box lacrosse and how to make that transition really easy is what I'm trying to do, because I'm a huge believer in the box game based on what I've seen it do for myself and my athletes and teams.
How does the growth of box in kind of Nashville look today? When it comes to kind of that, there's not a lot on the ground in these non-hotbed areas. I'm just interested because I think the benefits of playing is evident, right? You get more touches, you get a lot more thinking involved. Like that small-sided feel is definitely what coaches should be trying to do. But how does that look in your area? And then how can coaches go about trying to get their boys exposed to this if they're only playing field right now?
Yeah, I'm going to take a shot at Nashville, but Nashville just sucks for lacrosse and growing right now. It's really bad. The Parks and Recs boards, it's not set up for the introduction of new sports right now. They were kind of living off of, when it was just football, just soccer, just basketball. And now sports like rugby, lacrosse, even cricket are kind of making a little bit of an appearance here in Nashville and Williamson County. So it's tough to kind of like really grow it and getting going. There are good, travel club programs out of here that group kids and they try to do it, but the facilities are our major issue right now in Nashville. Sure. So I would say like Nashville box lacrosse, not great, but it's in par with just about every other southern state. I don't think any of the southern states have really figured it out. There's some that are like pushing and growing it, and they're definitely there, but they're very much in the beginning stages. And I compare it to, Texas has a fair amount of box lacrosse. Colorado has tons. California has a fair amount as well. More and both all across the state. So you compare it, and it's nowhere near, and it's purely the facilities' fault. And I know that it would be better if there was better access to facilities.
What's a good way to go about kind of trying to have the example of box without being in the actual box game? If you're telling me, hey, there's no box access to these kids in Nashville, but I'm running a high school there, how can I implement some techniques or just things you would see that you can grow through? Basically, how do we figure it out without having box is my question.
Yeah, great question. And I think this is the number one question. I think the programs that figure this out are going to exponentially grow in development. So the way that I would define it is this. If you don't have access, there's two ways. You don't have access to a good rink. There's two ways to go about it. One, just set up a box field on an outdoor field. Yeah, you're not getting the boards. The ball isn't staying in play. But if you want to work on finishing, you can still work on finishing. You can work on that gameplay. It's just a little bit slower because there's no boards. The other thing I'm a huge fan of is sixes. I think not only is it great from a player development perspective, but I think it's actually a more economical way to grow the sport for programs because you're reducing the number of coaches, players, and field space that you need to effectively run a program, which combats the major growth points and growing pains of most field lacrosse programs in non-traditional areas. So, and it is really great because not only does it allow you to kind of get that pace and work on the breakaways, which is a big IQ development piece, but when you look at the footwork and the stick work, you can get away with being more of a box type guy when you play sixes, or you can be a very pure field player where you're really just working on those big fundamental dodges that you're going to see. And then the defense is definitely a little different. People are playing with a short stick, so the angles that you get and what you're defending. And so you just have to recognize that, yeah, on defense, I'm just going to work on my angles and my drop steps.
Yeah, it's an interesting hybrid there with sixes. Obviously, the Olympics bringing that into play a bunch. There's a lot of haters for sixes as well. A lot of people are saying, hey, that this sport, it looks more like basketball now. And we see that with a little bit of the PLL and the 2-point line. What do you say to the haters of sixes out there that just want a more traditional field play?
Well, box, we like to chirp, right? So maybe they just can't handle it. No.
I love it.
I would chirp and I would say that, but I do respect that. Like, field lacrosse has a very structured pacing to it. And like for very pure, fundamentally sound attackmen, they probably don't want to go back and play defense, right? Or very sound pulls. So like, I definitely understand not wanting to play it, but I do think that if you can't figure out a way to thrive in sixes, that you're missing the most reduced version of the game, which is just passing, catching, running, shooting, dodging, right? Scooping. If you're doing those things really well, you should be an efficient sixes player.
I appreciate you giving some tips to the coaches out there that, don't have access to the box game. How long do you think it's going to take before we see the box game kind of transition southward, right? We saw that with lacrosse in general. It did spread out to the Atlantas and the Dallases, the Cali and Colorado, all that stuff. How long do we think it will take box to kind of do that same thing? I would love to see the NLL grow to those areas as well. Nashville feels like a really cool fit when it comes to city size and what's going on there. Obviously, interest in lacrosse needs to, have an uptick for them to move. But yeah, I would love to see like additional NLL teams. So what do you think it takes for this like kind of box lacrosse movement to make its way into what we see with the field?
Great question. I think the biggest thing is more knowledge around the sport, because there are running programs that have done it for the past 17 years. Running field or running box, you give me the choice any day, and you want to talk about ease, I just field lacrosse. Just sign up and go. Where box, you have to kind of sell the families a little bit more on the actual experience. And so that makes it tough. Then you also have to deal with like facilities and just like needing the actual like equipment that you need to play box lacrosse as well. So, and then you have less players playing than on a field team. So now the whole economics, the metric of it is so different. And I think that in order for those economics, like those negatives that we could perceive as negatives with running box programs, I think if we have that fundamental awareness and how to teach it, that knowledge, for some of those guys that maybe don't want to jump in because of the negatives there, they have this option. They understand it so much. Like, we got to do this, even if it's just like a booster for our program, it's going to make our kids better. Where if they don't quite know how to facilitate the transfer of knowledge, just picking and rolling, and the negative economic side of it, you're really just like, yeah, why would I do this? Why would I be a part of this? Kind of situation. Let's make my life easy. I'll just do field lacrosse and maybe weave a little bit in here and there.
I do want to get into the weeds for those that are obviously more experienced with the box game, and I love getting into the nuances of skill development, technique, all that stuff. But staying kind of surface level for people who, are still trying to figure out that game, who are the best people to go, besides yourself, to go and learn about box lacrosse, to say, hey, like, I'm looking at, if I can't get access to a field, I still want to bring in these principles, see if I can teach them in the field game?
Yeah, honestly, there's not a lot of content out there. There is Box Lacrosse Breakdown. I think he does a really good job. I don't know his name. I think his name is Austin something. But he breaks stuff down, and it's like, yeah, you can tell this guy's a high-level player. He gets it. He knows what's going on. I don't really see a lot of other, like, content of what you could really do, to grow it. There's another guy, Christian Watts. I think he's an American guy who, made it into the NLL. He's playing with Halifax. He's kind of starting to post some stuff just of like him shooting with other NLL teammates. And I think that stuff is so valuable because when you watch a really high level player just shoot the ball, it's different. And you can pick up so many little nuances of what he's trying to do and how he's trying to do it just by watching and being observant. So those would be like the two recommendations, of other accounts. I haven't really seen anything else other than that. It's really educating.
I love the ability to watch all the NLL games. ESPN has most of them, if not all of them. That's a really cool access point for people that just want to watch the game. And it's you don't have to buy an extra subscription, to my knowledge. You can just hop on to ESPN Plus, tune on any games. Are you a NLL fan? Do you have a certain team that you follow?
Yeah, I love the NLL. I have so much respect for those guys. I don't have a certain team. I just want to see people play and like go get after it. I'm more of an underdog guy if I am going to root for anyone though. So if I'm, checking the standings and I tune into a game, I want to see the underdog, kind of pull something off here.
All right, so let's get into the weeds. Let's get a little bit more in depth. You mentioned shooting. We can definitely touch on that up front. I want to talk about players that have a tough time transitioning to the field lacrosse game as opposed to players that do exceptionally well. I think Jeff Teet's a great example of a guy who's just absolutely phenomenal in both. You do see a good amount of guys that can do both really well, but what is that level of technique, or what is the difference that makes a great player be able to transition to a player that just never figured it out?
Transition from field to box?
From field to box, yep.
Yeah.
Or, talk about that nuance too. Like, is it harder to go from box to field or field to box?
I've been thinking about that a lot lately because I've been asked it a lot. And the more I look at it, the more I think if you're a fundamentally sound field player, you should assimilate well into box. And because you think about all the principles for field lacrosse, you're really just going to have to refine your movement patterns and probably reduce some of the footwork and some of the things that you're doing because there's just less area to score in front of the net. You have less time, less space, all that stuff, right? But what makes it tough to transition is the actual grittiness of the play. You have a 30-second shot clock that you are expected to play to, and then you have to transition the ball up the floor. And then you have to play hard again up there on the other side of the floor. And you're just getting cross-checked whether you're on defense or offense. Guys are allowed to take shots. It's hard. It's hard to comprehend. And if you're a guy that is not super comfortable creating their own space, it's going to be really tough to assimilate into box. And then for defenders, I just see a lot of defenders, they get a little nervous when they don't have that extra, stick length. So they kind of chop it up and this isn't going to work for me. It's like, dude, if you can play box defense, you can easily go play field defense because of the all-out assault that the offensive players can throw at you, and then they move on their picks and they kind of jack you up. I mean, the amount of clips that you see of great goals being scored in the NLL and a big pick being blown up right before it. Oh my gosh, you
checking a guy in the back right before his buddy sweeps off the top of it.
Yeah, it's like he just buries it and finishes. You see this defender in the corner and he's getting up and he's got a stinger, and his stinger, you get a cross check right up on the meat of your butt, the high butt area, and that stinger goes down your leg. You can't even stand up. You're like, this sucks. So
yep. There is such a clear. I love that your answer is basically toughness, right? Grittiness. I love that answer because you would go down. I remember coaching some club teams. We went down to the Nationals tournament in Florida, and the native teams would come down, and the toughness was just a different level from these kids that are just used to field. That had never stepped in the box game. I mean, you see these guys, and they know how to move their bodies once they're getting contact. They know how to roll off. They just hit harder. It absolutely is a grittiness difference.
It's a fundamental difference in the game, and it absolutely, you can tell the kids that are tough tend to do a little bit better. And I've seen kids get really tough too playing box, right? Kids that have come in and you're like, oh, I don't know, are you going to hang? And, after a couple of years, it's they're the guys that are running through everybody. It just, they don't care anymore. And, as a coach, seeing kids develop confidence like that, I know that they're turning into stronger versions of themselves outside of lacrosse, and that's where it gets really cool for me, right?
I almost feel like I'm getting soft here because I had a guy on, I think it was, no, his last episode. He was talking about intensity and violence, and that's kind of the culture that he wanted to bring to the program. And I was asking him, like, how do you measure intensity and violence and be able to do that with the drills that you're implementing without doing that all the time? You know, because you got guys that can get hurt, you got all these things. But now I feel soft. I'm going for a second episode saying, hey, I know we're getting gritty and all that stuff, but how do we balance kind of staying healthy throughout the season when it comes to something like box?
Yeah, the box practices are totally different than field lacrosse. And that's actually one of the things that's kind of hard. I've brought so many groups into box and like kind of taught them about coaching. You bring so many teams in to box lacrosse, and their coaches, you know, they want to teach all about this game, so they get right into the nitty gritty, and you see them just smashing picks right constantly, and then kids are getting beat up at practice. Where if you watch like a typical junior practice or a senior practice, you're going to see probably an hour of shooting. No joke. You're going to see close to an hour of running, passing, catching, and shooting. And there might be some defense in there. There might be some 2-on-1s. But really, like the last 30 minutes, you'll get some contact in and some 5-on-5, some 2-on-2 work, you know, et cetera. But a lot of it is just passing and catching, finishing the ball, you know, and that makes a huge, huge difference. So when you think about longevity now in the season, right? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create, every time I step on the floor, urgency to pass and catch, urgency to run full speed. I want to see those guys working really hard because that's the pace that you're going to have to play at, right? And so I know that the intensity is going to be there in a box game because if it's not there, you're going to get put down, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think it's, you know, I also think that Canadian culture is just so big in box lacrosse. And when you look at like how they manage, hockey culture and the intensity, and it's like, yeah, you want that, but at the same time, you just can't have that full go all the time. Those are special guys that can do that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm interested in kind of this box concept too because of the off-ball play. You mentioned the short shot clock guys always have to play. A couple of the young teams that I'm working with now, that's like the hardest thing to coach the defenders on is, hey, when your guy doesn't have the ball, you need to be working. It's not just hey, you're only working when your guy does have the ball. And I feel like without even being coached, you can learn that in box because it's just like it's always going. There is no point where you're stopping. So I love that. Mm-hmm. Real quick, I want to mention before we get into shooting, I do want to mention that you did a couple videos on Jeff Teat. You know, he's a great box player, phenomenal field player as well. What makes his transition so seamless, right? We talked about guys that maybe don't transition as well, but like what makes his ability to play both? What are those techniques and the skills that he has that make him special in that way?
Yeah, well, first, I think he had a huge advantage growing up, you know, outside of Toronto and Ontario. I believe that's where he's from. And I think his dad played for a while, too. His dad was a pretty good player. So those are definitely like base roots thing. But when I watch Teat play over so many other players, the biggest takeaway that I have with him is how patient and almost slow he moves with or without the ball. Like he's setting people up. You can just see it the whole time. He gets the ball in his stick and he's constantly like, can I get you to step over here so I can get my hands free over here? And he does such a good job of stepping on the gas pedal when he needs to, but he's always playing at that like kind of low RPM. And because he's playing at that low RPM, he's able to think, I think, faster than his defenders, and he's moving and manipulating them more. And so then if you're able to do that in box, it's only going to get easier because it's going to get slower because everything is bigger in field lacrosse. And I think that's where you see like the highlight plays that he's making in field. You're like, wow, how does he see that? It's like, oh yeah, because everything's in slow motion for him.
Yeah. That's really interesting because you're mentioning like going from really slow to really fast. And those are the things, as opposed to maybe having a baseline speed or going fast all the time. Well, your defender's going to go fast all the time. But if you can slow down and then speed up, it's super interesting. I saw a video on Messi one time where a guy was explaining how he just walks the majority of the game. He's just walking. But there's those brief moments when he is spectacular and changes speed so quickly. I really like that. Any last thoughts on that transition positively from field to box?
Yeah, I think, also who's coaching you and helping you transition, I think is super important. And I think that's important because you get people who are well-intentioned coach. They care about their athletes. They want to get them in box, but maybe they don't have the fundamental awareness and IQ of how you build a box player. And it can be a really devastating combination. And you start off like, we're going to do loose balls in the corner. And then the kid gets smoked and he breaks his neck, or, we're pass down, pick down. Come on, Johnny, pass down, pick down. You're like, what? Chill, bro, chill. Everything's fine. Like, yeah, he doesn't have to pass down and pick down every time. He can go clear through. He can go set a seal. He can do these different things, but we have to show them those things. And if we don't show them those things, we can't hold them to that standard, right? And so I think, who you're transitioning with is super important. So maybe you had a bad experience, a couple years later, a new opportunity presents itself with a new person. Try it again, especially if you're really trying to get to that next level. You want to go get recruited. You had a bad one when you were in youth and you have another experience. Do it without a doubt. You have to go do it. And the people that you do it with it kind of make it, because it's such a conceptual sport. It's not like field where you could have a set of parameters and kind of run it through. In field, you have to have tons of knowledge and experience too. I don't mean to short sell that.
Sure.
But there's just more awareness around field in the States than there is around box. So that would be the big thing for me.
Okay, I promise last question before we get into the weeds. Someone's sitting there just like, God dang it, guys. Let's get into shooting. But how much is the carryover between like scheme or just the carryover between sports between box and hockey, right? They fundamentally, they look the same. They're on the same ice or turf. And, obviously the movements, but they're going to be a little bit different. So what are the things positively that transfer from hockey to box that you see Canadians do so well? Other than toughness. I think we've hit that on that. Yeah.
Want to talk about it? No. So John Gallant is the defensive coordinator for University of Denver under Matt Brown. And so he did a ton of coaching with him, and I spent a lot of time around him. And John always said this one thing to his athletes. He always said, you got to be paranoid when you're on the bench. You got to be paranoid when you're playing. And so what he was trying to allude to was you have to constantly be thinking, because there is no Johnny goes to the right wing, I go to the left wing. There's spacing and concept, and you have to try to get to these high percentage scoring areas, and you have to think about how to do that, and then you have to have the skill behind it to actually be able to perform the action. And so when I think about box lacrosse, and I think about the biggest comparison, and I play a little bit of hockey too, when I think about hockey and how everything kind of works together, box made me a more paranoid athlete, which made me think more when I played, which allowed me to use this and my body, which made me more dangerous.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about thinking, like before you made that transition or before you started working on this part of the game, what would you be doing instead? Like what was the switch where you started to, get paranoid in a positive way?
Yeah. So I highlight like one of the first times I came back after the very first field lacrosse game I played in San Jose, California, after I had played my first real box season in Canada. And I'll never forget it. I can see it clearly in my mind. I was carrying the ball, I was clearing it from defense to offense. And normally where I would have set up wherever at the top, I kind of instinctually pulled myself top left in like a 2-3-1 set so I could sweep to my strong hand and get to the right. And I did, and I think whatever. It was just a, funsies game. Who cares? But I was successful in this, dodge. And so then I just kept going back there and just kept setting up because I'm like, they can't stop me here. What am I doing? Like, why am I going to go split to my left when I can just get to my right every time? And until they make me get to my left, I'm just going to go to my right over and over and over again. Then they take that angle away. I'll S-dodge underneath you now. Right? So now I'm playing these games and then, okay, well now you're going to try to take that S-dodge away by sending a slide. Okay, well I'll just bait the slide and then I'll roll back over the top. Right? And so now we're playing the game and thinking a little bit more about how we're applying these strategies where when you're like an all-out field lacrosse midfielder and I could go both left and right, and I could shoot fast both ways. When I was in high school and I was playing college, I didn't care where you line me up. Just line me up. I'm going to run past you. But now that I have this box influence, now I'm thinking about that next step. And I'm thinking about more and more, further and further out of what I can do to manipulate you.
Like a game within the game, essentially, and you're playing that. I love that. All right, we can get to the nuances here. You mentioned, when you look at a box practice, a lot of times they're going to be shooting for an hour, is what I think we talked about. Let's talk about those nuances, man, because there is a clear difference. And I think the field game is catching up. Like, I think 10, 15 years ago, it was still that, like, during practice or pre-practice, you see guys just ripping it from 15 yards, and that's all they do. And they're picking the ball up and just taking it back, and they probably get 10 shots the whole time. And box is incredibly different, right? You're finishing in tight, you're finishing in close, working on moving your body, all these different things. So would love to know kind of just the nuance there of just what box players inherently work on and get better on that transitions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much you could do with that. So I'll try to like center in on a point here.
Sure.
But this is like the cool stuff. This is what people get really, engaged with. So let's talk about box finishing right now, and let's talk about how we can have fundamental strategies to be more successful, right, with that. And so then we can kind of like expand out on that.
Sure.
So I stole this term from Shaden back, in the day when we were, coaching together, and he talked about finishing on a box net. He called it, you got to take the path to success. And so there's 3 principles and then a 3 fake system that I use to teach this. And I think that it's how most Canadians are going to kind of think about, box lacrosse in general. And I think it's going to kind of transition for hockey as well. So and just finishing on the net. So the first thing that we have to understand on the path to success is we have to get to the right spot on the floor to be able to finish. Okay, because if we're a righty and we're on our wrong side, we're just not going to have the angle right away. So everything else that we do really becomes drastically harder if we don't start in the correct position. The second thing that we need to do to have a very good shot is we need to learn how to play with the stick up on our shoulder in that like shoulder cradle position, right? So that turns us in from a ball carrier / mover into a player that can shoot the ball, pass the ball, and dodge, right? So now the goalie has to step up and respect us. So we're on our strong side. We have our stick on our shoulder. Now we're kind of getting somewhere. The third thing that we have to do when we're shooting, and we have to think about we're always trying to get across the face of the net, right? And that's going to make the goalie move post to post. So now we're on our strong side, our stick is on our shoulder, we have options, and we're making the goalie move post to post. These are the 3 fundamentals that we're trying to hit on every single kind of shot that we take that's on the move. Set shooting is much more like field lacrosse, and you can get into the deception of it and all that stuff. But now there's a 3 fake system that I use to teach athletes.
Real quick, before we move into that, number 2, when you talk about having kind of that stick in the loaded position, what are the terms you're using? What are you seeing from guys that do this poorly? Because I think even up to the college level, I hear coaches like, hey, guys are coming in the program and they don't know how to correctly hold the stick, or they don't like, what are those things that potentially are things that you're teaching when it comes to that stick, that hand position, the stick position, all of that stuff?
Yeah. So the big thing, I'll use this pen as an example, is the first thing, we don't want to grab the stick with our palm. We want to grab the stick with our fingers, right? And if we grab it with our fingers, we can feel that we're just going to be able to move the stick a lot better. So both our bottom hand and our top hand, we want to grab the stick with our fingers. Now, I've thought a lot about this, and I don't know where this came from, but there are some people that like teach guys to like finger point when they shoot. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Nope.
Okay, I've seen it. I don't know where this is coming from, but you want to think about, like, if you're holding the stick with your fingers, your 2 strongest fingers, I guess not a finger, but your thumb and this finger are going to be, your strongest fingers. As you get to this finger, yeah, it's strong, but it works kind of with this one. These 2 are not strong. If you're doing this finger pointing thing when you're playing, you're taking your top hand, your 2 strongest points of contact with the stick off the stick, and you're holding it with your weak points, which I don't see how that's ever going to help you play the game.
Yeah.
So holding the stick correctly and being in that kind of neutral grip so you can like roll your stick over and throw those inside fakes. That's the other thing. I see so many players, they want to fake on a goalie and they do that big player fake where they like turn the stick outside and the stick ends out in here and they got to bring the stick back and then they got to shoot, right? We want to be able to throw quick fakes and shoot off of that. So that hand positioning where you start from is mission critical.
How much is the bottom hand getting involved? Because that's another thing, although, again, it's all over the map. For coaches that are just starting or coaching youth guys, you're going to see that a lot more, whereas college guys have it a little bit more figured out. But when it comes to the bottom hand, what's the emphasis you're putting on the bottom hand in box in general?
So when you have two hands on your stick and you're up, like that bottom hand shouldn't really be doing anything. It's just more of a stabilizer. You know, if you're going to like bring the stick across and throw these in, your bottom hand gets involved. But if you're doing like these little like power correction cradles before you shoot in box lacrosse, you're actually screwing yourself over because you're adding another mechanic into your shot release. And you're not always going to have that time to pull that off, number one. But number two, what if you've trained yourself to give this bottom hand cradle, but then you want to do this thing I call upgrading your shot, where you're in the middle of your shot and you skip it to the backside, right? But if you have to have that bottom hand cradle in there and you do that every time before you shoot, now the ball's in a weird spot, you're trying to upgrade your shot and the ball flies off because you're not able to pull it. So I always think reducing, the answer in box is always to reduce the amount of movement, reduce everything. So the closer you can keep your stick to your face when you're doing a big face dodge, the better. Reduce the distance there, right? The less time you have in between like loading your stick to shooting it, better, right? The less time the ball is in your stick on a quick stick, better, right? These are the things that we have to do. We're field that's not always going to apply because a big like turn down cradle or, you know, some like bottom hand power cradle. Yeah, like if you're trying to shoot the ball through the goalie's face, you know, we got to really crank on that thing a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, a lot of times you're getting defenders right in your face in box too. Like there's no space, so you got to minimize movement. I love the simplicity of it. But let's go back to your second point that you were making, which is the three fake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have these three variables: your location, your stick placement, and then making the goalie move post to post. And then you have just a simple reading system. Okay, so the first read, your stick. Remember, your stick's up on your shoulder. You're approaching from your strong side. The goalie is moving. If you see a spot on the net, take it. Just take it. I call it a quick strike. Okay. You see that top corner, bam, snap it there. Put it there hard. Right? Now, if we don't see anything on the net that we like, we see a goalie baiting us. As we're coming down to that net, we're going to throw a short far, which is where we're going to fake to that near side. And then we're going to take a step or two and we're going to reach our hands out and we're going to shoot it to the far side. And so the reason this is such an effective scoring strategy is we start talking about the game within the game. So the quick strike look, I'm coming in and I'm shooting it. If I take one of those and I bury early on, now that goalie is going to be more likely to bite on that short side fake when I throw that. And then I'm going to use my legs to take two steps and I'm going to use my arms to reach them out to shoot the ball around the goalie, which is going to almost turn it into a foot race to the back post. So now I'm giving myself options. And then the third option is short, far, short, which is I throw a short side fake, and I take those two steps. I throw a big far side fake to get that goalie to move, and then I throw it back to the short side. And so I'm playing that game within the game, and I'm looking to see how that goalie reacts. So rather than saying like, hey, if you fake at this goalie's shoulder and he's a stick side righty goalie and he lifts that thing up, then I can throw it to the 5-0. No. Let's figure out moving the goalie post to post. Let's figure out that the far side of the net is always open, right? And when we start to understand those concepts, we become better finishers. And I'll highlight on the area that I see most field players, they struggle with the concept of the far side of the net is always open. And that's because A, they maybe don't trust their stick, that their stick has another set of eyes. They can reach out and beat the goalie to the back post. But B, there's also that little bit of toughness principle. Because you know if you're going to make that goalie move post to post, you're going right through that, that danger zone area, and you're probably going to eat one. And so then it turns into how bad do you want to score that goal versus get that shot off.
It's interesting because you see guys that are comfortable with that, right? And I haven't put that together till just now is the ability to just play in tight and want to do that, want to move the goalie in tight by getting your stick across, but you're going to eat that check or eat that slide. It's really interesting. When it comes to throwing an efficient check, How are you, or sorry, check, fake. How are you teaching that fake mechanic? Because obviously it's a big portion. You don't just want to like make that move and not twist your wrist. So how do you teach that fake?
Yeah. So there are two fundamental fakes that I would teach, and then there's layers and layers of stuff that you can throw in between it, right? So you can use your head to be deceptive. You can drop your shoulders, right? You can drop your hands. You can shoot over the goalie. You can shoot under the goalie. Thousands of things. There's two basic fakes, though, that you need to master before any of those things can come into play. And that is the short side fake and the far side fake. Short side, I'm a righty. I'm looking at the net. I'm faking to move that goal to make him think I'm trying to throw it to that near side of the net. It would be the left post. And I'm trying to get him to hold on that position. So when I throw that fake, I'm bam, and I'm looking to see, did he bite on that fake? And what I mean by a bite is he like lifting his shoulders up and showing to defend the net? Because if he's starting to lift and show his shoulders, then I know that he's stepping forward at me and I can get the angle around him, right? So, and then if they're not particularly biting, right, then we're going to need to go into that far side fake. And so all we're really looking to do, if I'm a righty, I'm on my strong side, I'm throwing that fake to the back side of the net, so the righty post. And I'm just reaching out and I'm trying to get that goalie to do that same motion, either step and show, maybe like swing his arms out to the side. And when he does that, then I'm just going to bring the stick back across and bury it to the short side. And so it's all with like the roll of the wrist. The stick has to be in your fingers, right? And that's the mechanic, and that's the mechanic. It's that simple. There's not much else. The big thing that I like to focus on, especially when athletes are first learning faking, is I think it's a huge priority to keep the butt end of the stick up, pointed directly ahead of you when you're faking, because so many kids will get in the habit of throwing huge fakes and they turn that butt end down. And when that butt end's down at the ground or even pointed back at you, you can't throw the ball. So you have to teach yourself to be able to throw these fakes and kind of adjust that butt end to always keep it pointed ahead so you can always throw off your fakes. And then as you get better, you see guys like Lyle Thompson and Josh Byrne, and they're like throwing these fakes like this, and their butt end is pointed more down to the ground, but they have so much strength in their wrist that they can pull this off and take those shots.
I love that nuance because that's what everybody sees, right? Is the one where the butt ends down and like, I'm going to do that. Well, now you're taking much longer to get that fake as well. If you leave it up here, you could probably hit a few before you get to the second fake if you're bringing it all the way down.
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay. From the goalie's perspective, or I guess from the shooter's perspective, looking at the goalie, I'm assuming patience is probably the thing that gives you a lot of problems when you're doing these fakings, right? Because I've got some goalies that just are trying to move too quick and they get themselves kind of off the line. But I would love to hear from your perspective, like what are the goalies that give you problems, or what are the best kind of goalie attributes in box?
Oh, which goalie doesn't give me problems? I wish they'd just all let my shots go in, God, just figure it out. I'm a box lacrosse guy, for crying out loud. Just let my shots go in here. So what, there's different types of goalies. There's two basic forms of goalies where we've gone away from one. There's movers and then there's blockers. So movers are going to be more reactive in the net and blockers are going to play more angles. So for me personally, either one, it just depends on how you play it and how you cut the cookie. Both have their own challenges to play against, right? Reaction-based goalies, are typically, it's just going to vary. It's totally going to vary on their preference. You have multiple arcs that you can run on. You look at a Dylan Ward, he plays a super high arc. He's almost has his toes on the crease. And then you look at a guy more like Rosie, who I just did a player breakdown on, Nick Rose with the Toronto Rock. I watched him do a penalty shot on Cody Jamieson, and he literally only moved 1 foot the entire time, and Jamieson went all the way across the face of the net. So his goal was like to stay in the net and take one step out with his foot, and he was trying to keep it down. So the biggest, I think, to answer, the best way I can answer your question is what most people are going to struggle with, which is just being accurate enough to hit your spot. All of your problems go away if you become a really accurate shooter. And I remember my dad was a professional drummer. And so he, when I was a kid growing up, he's like, man, if I was you, I would be able to put that ball in that corner 10 out of 10 times, right? And that's what he told me. And being a young man, I was like, yeah, whatever, show you, dad. Now I'm like constantly find myself, I'm telling kids, like, yeah, you think you're accurate? Go take 10 balls, stand 10 yards from the net, and see how many times you can hit a 3x3 inch spot on the net. Because ultimately, like, and maybe 3x3 is a little, a little extreme, but like 4x4, yeah, if we're able to hit out of 10 shots, 8 out of 10 of those, you're going to score a lot in field and in box. But that's time that you have to really dedicate to your accuracy. And if you're an American first player, I don't think you get the talk every day at practice about being a really accurate shooter. You get the power, and it makes sense for the game, right? But when you get like, we want to think about like high level development, accuracy is kind of everything. It's kind of everything.
Yeah. I really love this conversation. I didn't know going in how I would do because I'm not a box player, so I was a little nervous, honestly. But talking through this stuff is so interesting because what you get is that the box game, you're shooting a lot more. You're probably taking double the amount of shots than a field game, and so the emphasis on shooting and being accurate when you do so makes a ton of sense. Especially, you mentioned the short shot clock too. Like you don't have a lot of time to set up a scheme, and it's more free flow. So. Interesting. How are you teaching shooting in practice then? Like, what are some of the drills that you like? I'm sure there's a lot of field. Look, I spend a lot of time on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm sure there's a lot of offensive coaches that need an upgrade when it comes to what they're teaching and shooting to, work on this accuracy, for example. So really interested in how you're teaching shooting in that environment that can transition to field.
Yeah. So when we think about how it's going to transition to field, it's just leaning back on those fundamentals and being able to do that full speed. So a lot of shooting drills, we're just trying to set up patterns and create shots, right? That are going to be high quality looks and high percentage looks. So we're setting up drills that are going to get tons of touches. I'm going to, be talking about pace the entire time because there's nothing worse than a shooting drill that has zero pace. You're just sitting there, you're waiting, guy gets to the front of the line, now it's my turn, and I shoot. As a coach, I am stressing pace of those drills and shooting with urgency. Now, so there's like so many drills that we could talk about, and there's picking and all this stuff, but I want to talk about a more of nuanced subject that I don't hear anybody talking about, and that's actually catching. Because I think in order to be able to get good shots, we first need to catch the ball. And so one of the fundamental problems that I see, and this is what I've seen with high-level players, when they come into the box for the first time, a lot of them struggle to run full speed and catch the ball. Now, I don't mean they actually struggle catching the ball. They actually struggle to keep their stride going at the same speed while they're catching the ball. And so I think developing the ability to have a track star lower body, right, and a upper body that's a lacrosse player, that's what I'm looking to do to make things more efficient. So speaking to all the coaches and the players, if you're an athlete and you're not able to run through the ball and keep that same stride and not have any sort of chops or deviations in your steps, and you're able to catch that ball with soft hands. So I always talk about like your bottom hand kind of like an air brake. It should be like coming up to decelerate the ball back, because if we can work on catching it with that open face, we can always move the ball out right away. You've just become 1,000 times better at lacrosse. And it's like the difference is astronomical, because you're going to now create more opportunities for yourself, because you're going to be able to transition the ball up the floor faster because you're running when you're catching the ball, as opposed to taking a choppy step or two, which might only knock off a second, but that's one.
Well, the angles change too for the defense. I love this. When you were talking, it reminded me of the NFL Combine, where you see the receiver go down a straight line and have to run full speed while turning here, catch, drop, catch, drop, catch, drop. And they're running as fast as possible. It's really good. Yeah. And you see a lot of young guys. What do they want to do when they catch?
Stop.
Just stop. Yeah. Just be there and stop. Yeah. Keep riffing on this, man. I really like this concept. Yeah. If you got anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. I got another thing. So now, right. So we have this whole concept of catching. So now let's give everybody a little bit of my 2 cents of shooting, right? So what I see, and this is going to sound crazy to everybody. How many players? Let me hold this up real quick. Got a lot of notes here.
I got a workshop here. I love it. Let's go.
Yeah. So let me draw this real quick. Forgive my drawing too, because I'm not a great artist. All right. So can we see this? Is it too blurry?
It might be a little blurry.
No, it's not going to work. Okay. In field lacrosse, you have long poles that can make trail checks. In box lacrosse, you don't see a lot of trail checking because you see a lot of guys just cross checking, which means when you turn the corner on your defender, you have a lot more time there to get into a windup and set your feet and shoot it. And the reason you want to set your feet and shoot it is because you're automatically going to be a more accurate shooter, which is what we kind of chimed in on earlier, right? Accuracy. You would be amazed at the number of players that I have to literally stop and demo multiple times how to pull up for a set shot from the outside. How to go from a run into just, I call it a stop and pop shot. Just running and stopping and pulling up. And that ability to do that and reduce that into a really quick shot, and you can get it from overhand, 3/4, sidearm, underhand shot. Having that down and that footwork, really important, because we need you to stop and pull up for the most part. Sweeps don't happen a whole bunch when you go over the top, right? So if you're going over the top, you have to set your feet, because otherwise you're going to run into some big corn-fed defender and he's going to pop you while you're sweeping and running to your wrong side, and it's not going to go very well. We're seeing a little more of it in the NLL, where we're getting sweeping shots happening and they're scoring, like guys like Josh Byrne, and I know Bushi pulls it a fair amount as well. But like, that is a super advanced shot. You really need to get to the top, set your feet, and fire the ball.
It's almost like a pull-up jumper in basketball. You don't want to run into that other adjacent defender and take some fadeaway shot and all that stuff when you have pressure that's coming from your face. Yeah, I like that. I like that concept, man. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm interrupting or whatever, but keep going, man, because I love this. I do see this stop, and it's like one of the coolest shots in lacrosse when they lower the shoulder, although it could be called a ward. When they lower the shoulder and they knock the guy over and then they plant their feet, you see that a good amount, where they like, okay, beat your guy, plant the feet, shoot. But you're right to say that like field guys don't ever beat their guy and then stop. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting.
It's really crazy when you start to break it down and you think about that, and you think about that's a struggle that athletes have. Athletes have that struggle. So then you start to think about, well, gosh, if they're struggling with such a base level concept like that, how the heck are they going to do a 2-man or a 3-man game or anything like that, right? And that's where kind of, going back to my channel, that's why I'm doing this, because, at the end of the day, I want you to learn from my experience, right? And see this. And I think that the stuff that we're talking about is so high level, it's so niche, it's actually like reduced, and it's a very like low level concept when you think about it. But I see it as some of the biggest difference makers for field to box guys.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about offensive movement, but I do want to, I think we're in a great conversation here on shooting. So if there's any last concepts on shooting, I think you brought a really cool concept of like making sure your guys are moving full speed while they catch, and that motion doesn't have like a misstep or kind of a step that is going to not be efficient at the end of the day. So I really like that. But anything else on shooting specifically before we move to more kind of team stuff?
Yeah, last point. So on your cuts, when you're playing, if you're cutting, let's say I'm in the righty shooter position. So think about like top left almost, and for a 2-3-1 style offense. You got that shooter position. If I'm cutting, I need to make sure that I'm not arcing when I cut, that I'm cutting on a straight flat line. So kind of like a hot knife through butter, right? You're just straight through, because if you're veering off to either side, you're going to be running into other defenders. You're going to be getting in other offensive players' way. You're really trying to think about straight line through to the middle on whatever route you can, and then like circling back to your side. And that will make you a better offensive player, because you're going to be getting post to post. You're going to have a better route. Your teammates are going to have more room to work with you.
How do you think about cutting and essentially getting open off ball on the inside? Because that to me feels like a little bit of like if you see it in American football, you essentially like have receivers that are great at finding little pockets that can then get, open. How do you think about cutting, but then also trying to find space in a defense that is constantly moving and just trying to find that little amount of space to catch and shoot?
Okay, so that is really into the nitty gritty. I like that question. So let me rewind a little bit now, and I want to talk about high level, like a high level overview of off ball actions that I try to describe. So so there's this constant swing that's happening on the backside where you have the shooter, popping into space, and the shooter position is the most dangerous position besides being like right on the crease, right on the doorstep. It's a great area to get your hand, good shots off from, dodges from. You can even set picks there, right? But then you have the shooter position, and then right after the shooter position, you have the crease position. And the crease position, there's a righty crease and a lefty crease. So it's actually on the sides of the net. And the crease position is actually going to extend maybe a step or two below goal line extended. And that's because when you're off ball and you're on goal line extended, the goalie is going to be set up on the other side. So you're looking at what we call an empty net. And so even if you're a little below GLE, but your stick is above it, you can still score. And the lower you are, you're actually making that goalie move more to cover the post-to-post action to defend the short side of the net, right? So you have this like constant swinging of like filling the shooter and then cutting down and filling the crease. And then that's kind of like your basic cycle in exchange. There's like a middle kind of area in the half boards. I don't want to go into that right now. I just want to talk about these two. I think of it like a half pipe. So you're up, you've just filled the crease, you presented for a shot, you didn't get the ball. You see that the shooter is like now like cutting down towards where you are. You're now like a half pipe. You were up in the air, and now you're coming back down to the other side, and you're trying to fill and like kind of do a trick, if you will, over here on this part of the half pipe. And then that doesn't work, and now you're kind of swinging back to the other side. And so it's not so much about, if you can get and cut to space, great. But the majority of your cuts, you're not going to get to space because there's going to be defenders on your hands. Mm-hmm. So you're really thinking about, punching a hole in the defense. Like, I'm cutting and I'm going to drive into this guy and I'm going to create room for the guy behind me. And if my defender jumps, I'm open, right? So now we're playing a little bit more of a team style here. We're thinking about the guy behind us and we're creating space for them. And then we're just like moving off of that to where space is, right? So if I'm cutting down to that crease position and maybe there's a 3-man game happening and I see that there's already another guy there, well, I'm just going to go fill around the other side, or maybe I'll like circle around to the lefties and then circle around the back side of the crease and swing up and fill. So then that shooter will have time to cut into the middle a little bit more while that crease man goes up, right? So now I'm just adding this little bit of thinking in and I'm creating a lot more movement. But if I'm thinking about it like I'm on a half pipe and I'm over here and then I'm over here and then I'm over here and then I'm over here. And then I'm not cutting to free myself open. I'm cutting to create holes in the defense. Now we're going to create seams for those offensive players to step into. We're going to create seal opportunities to hold the defenders and get outside shots. And then depending on the way the defense is playing, the inside or the outside is going to open up.
How much of that is feeling your offensive teammates as opposed to a set scheme base, like I'm moving from this point to this point? How much of that is reading it as opposed to kind of knowing exactly where I'm going next?
Great question. So you can see it like Orangeville, I believe, ran a little bit of a picking system where they had their shooters kind of jump in into the middle, cut into the middle, and then hold in the middle, and then kind of come out and set what I call a Y pick near like the half board position. So kind of in between the shooters and the crease, just out with your butt to the boards a little bit more. We see that with some box offenses, and that will just happen kind of naturally too. But a lot of it for high level players, a lot of it is just thinking and reading and reacting. And then you just have the skills to kind of pull that stuff off. When it starts to become a schematic, it really can, you can hit little like quick hitter plays in box where, you can get a quick swing, but the reason you can't have like a motion style offense in box is because you have defenders that can hit you off ball. And you just literally might not be able to get there in time. And so you have to be able to think through those things.
Gotcha. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the nuance of offensive guys being able to hit defensive guys on ball. That is something you definitely don't see in field. It's going to get called 100% of the time, but you see it every time down the floor on in box. So I'm interested in how you think about picks working into this offensive movement, the timing of it. I know that was one of the posts that you had talking about pick timing. Would love to, hear how you're kind of teaching guys picks, but also just the nuances of that in the box game.
Yeah. Well, let's start high level, and then we'll just kind of start to, reduce it down and talk about how we can add layers in. So the first thing that we want to think about is I always think about teaching picks like that defender is kind of your trampoline. So especially for youth and, American box lacrosse, and pretty much anywhere that's not Canada, you're not always going to have super consistent reffing. I mean, are you always going to have consistent reffing in general? No. But when we think about, box lacrosse in the States, the consistency level is definitely going to go down just because like coaches and the players, the refs don't have enough experience either, right? It's not their fault. So what you can get away with on picks is drastically going to change game to game. So I always think that players need to be paranoid and thinking and testing, seeing what they can get away with. So you can always start your first, bit out of the game and like just go run a guy over and see if the ref calls it, right? And like just let the boys know, like, hey, I'm gonna go see what happens here and just see if this can work. But then like when we think about setting the actual pick, so I teach for consistency's sake, as you're approaching that defender, right before you're gonna make contact, plant your feet. And when you plant your feet and you're about to make contact, you're now not moving anymore, right? So you're going to get a little bit of leniency from the ref. And then I think about the cross check that you're going to give that defender. You're doing it as a way to stop their momentum from moving towards you, and you're trying to create momentum for yourself. So that kind of like that trampoline-ish style effect where I'm stopping my feet, I'm stopping your momentum, and I'm just getting a little bit of a push off of you to get in front of you, right? And then as you get to those higher levels, you're going to start hitting harder. But I mean, I play in the North American Box Lacrosse League. I can tell you I don't have to set very hard picks to get myself open, as opposed to like when I was playing senior up north, and it was like, it was damn near hit every time. Mm-hmm. So you really have to play to the actual game, right? Because if you're playing with less experienced box players, you're probably going to pick them and you're going to blow them up. And then it's going to be a change of possession either way. And even if you didn't do anything wrong because they weren't set in a strong position to receive that check, it's kind of you didn't get an advantage. So
sure.
Setting the pick the right way is super important. And then when we start thinking about direction of the pick, we don't refuse the pick as much in box lacrosse because it's really necessary to get our hands free. And so what we think about is we're trying to watch the direction that the back is facing of the picker. And that's going to tell us what route we need to be taking, to have a good pick, right? And so as you start watching, this picker setting this pick, now they can start like kind of flipping around and positioning themselves differently based on where that defender is, right? Because the minute you start to show a direction that you're going to go, or that the defender that's guarding the picker is going to start talking to the on-ball defender, say, hey, pick left. And what you'll see even more so in box than you're going to see in field is you're going to see early drop steps where the defenders are actually going to jump off to a side, open their hips up a little bit. And so then if you have some chemistry with a guy, you can kind of start picking on them in different ways. You can,
I'd imagine there's more switching in box too, right? You got two guys that are short sticks. You don't have the big little matchup. So that's where that bungee move comes in, or that trampoline move where it's kind of a pick and roll action.
Yeah. So you hit the nail right on the head. So, defenses are almost always going to switch. It's very rare that they're going to fight through picks because there's so many picks happening. You're going to get so out of position and you're just going to be tired. You're going to be tired from trying to fight through all those picks. It's way easier just to let that guy, switch and let him step up to the ball carrier. Big thing on those switches is the the defender who's picking up the ball has to do a good job of stepping out and pressuring if the ball is coming topside. That's a concept that I don't see enough guys doing, and that's when you see that stop and pop shot where they just pull up from the outside because they're not being guarded, right? If the ball goes underneath, we actually don't really want to step to that ball. We want to kind of hold that short side and let the goalie's positioning take away the short side of the net and just say like, yeah, can you hit the far side? Can you make, because if you step out when it's going low, there's way too much room to get to the inside or feed whatever you need to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I still want to stay on this pick action. You talked about the pick coming where you don't want to show the off-ball defender which side it's being set from. I think that's a really important concept. You see a lot of guys, setting picks where the defender can see it, essentially, in the field game. It's like, well, I could see that. I'm just going to get under it. But how much of the pick game is the off-ball picker coming to the on-ball player as opposed to the dodger starting his dodge and then running into the picker? Do you understand what I'm asking? Okay, yeah.
The picker has to do almost everything.
Okay,
right?
okay.
Like the picker has... So it starts with the picker battling to get inside. I always say set your picks inside out. So that picker has to battle to get behind the defender first and foremost. Because if you set a pick flat, it's not going to do anything. It's nothing. Might as well just stand there. And then when you think about like, okay, so now you have this picker battling. He has to talked about the back, right? Of like what direction his back is facing is where you're going to go. He has to figure out how to get you open in prime scoring spot. And then he also has to roll, right? So it's nothing new when you think about that. Like, yeah, a pick is obviously like we're creating a 2-on-1 situation that's going to the net. But he has to take a lot more precedent in getting you open because that defender has leverage on you for the most part. If they have their stick on you, they're going to steer you and be able to drive you out a lot more. And you're typically not going to have as much like runway to set those, set up those picks as well. So really thinking about like getting to the pick, and then the on-ball player has to do a really good job of engaging their defender. Every pick and roll starts with a one-on-one, right? That's what creates the engagement, and then that's what's going to ultimately allow you to drive into space, right? So you have to get really comfortable with having a defender on your hand while being patient and looking and waiting for the pick to come and seeing if there are any better backside opportunities. But as you start to make those reads, you get a little more comfortable. Things get a lot easier to handle the ball, and then your patience in field lacrosse really starts to show out.
Any last point on picks before we move? I want to end the episode here with transition and substitution game and how we can transition that from both sides.
Oh, love that. That's the best one. So with picking, I'll leave it with this. If the defense is pressuring out, you pick. If the defense is sloughed in, you seal. Seals trap the defenders inside and we shoot around them. We're not going to go set up a pick and roll if a defense is sloughed because there's going to be nowhere to roll to. So we have to understand the difference between when a defense is playing in tight versus when they're expanding out.
You see a lot of seals happening in man up, man down in the field game. I would love to see more seals in even play. I think it's one of the more under-taught things in the field game is sealing maybe off ball.
Yeah. I love seals. Seals are like, because if you're being paranoid and thinking constantly, you can catch defender and they have no clue. And by the time they have a clue, you've got them, right? I had a kid. His name was Brian Aketa. He was this like 5 foot. Him and his older brother played for me. He won 2 state championships with me back in California. But he was the master of sealing. He's a little 5'6" kid. Nobody would ever think of him as being like aggressive. He was so tough, and he would just sit there and read the defense, and he was specific on man up. He would just play a crease. We played a 3-3, and he would just impede the rotation every single time, and nobody would ever see it. But then you go back and watch film, you're like, why did that kid miss the rotation? It's like you see a kid just sitting there like holding this kid's stick, stopping the entire rotation. And, like the kid has no clue. The refs aren't looking there because it's so off ball that they wouldn't look there.
Does that get taught in box where you're holding the guy's stick very deceptively where a ref's not going to be seeing it to prevent movement?
Sticky fingers, baby.
Sticky finger.
Yeah.
That I almost feel like coaches should do more of that in field. Like that is not going to get caught in field all the time. And I know there's more space, so guys aren't on top of each other all the time. Do you see any relation that could translate to field there?
Yeah, I think it's, and so I've thought a lot about that. And I generally think it's like just us or players, if you're not like grabbing a little bit, you're probably not being super competitive. Because I know if I'm playing pickup hoops with my boys, you might get thrown down on the ground. Like I might just hold you up because I'm not going to let you score. I don't care. I just don't like, I'm going to grab you and I'm going to hold you up a little bit. And it's not about me holding you. It's about me eliminating or reducing the amount of advantage that you have. And that's when it kind of changes perspective, right? Because I'm not physically holding you in that spot. I'm just impeding you for a second.
What should a defender be grabbing? Are they grabbing a hand? Are they grabbing a jersey? Are they grabbing some of the stick? And how do they do that?
So you just got these little, so you just kind of like reach off and you can think about grabbing while you're holding. So you want to hold the stick, right? And then you grab them. If you think about grabbing, like if you grab their stick for a second and they go to move away, what happens? Their arms extend. So it starts to look like a little bit of a hold, right?
Yeah.
So if we can grab specifically into like the kidney pads and you can like hook some fingers into the kidney pad, if you grab the jersey's going to pull away. And it's going to show.
Are you thinking, go ahead.
Grab pads of anything. Of the more on the body that you can get to, the better. If you can get into like the arm pads or whatever area, and you can just for a second, or even it doesn't always have to be a hold. Sometimes you can like push their hands down and knock them off balance a little bit, right? And so everything you're doing, you're trying to get an advantage, right?
That's that paranoia you mentioned.
Yeah, like sometimes you're just trying to like honestly get a little wider so it's hard for that guy to get around you, right? So I'm not talking about tripping him, but if you get your leg out a little bit wider in a shuffle, he's going to have to go around you a little bit more, right? So everything is about creating advantages, and I think that's in all sports, but in box, because in box hockey, there's such a gray area, the game happens so fast, there's literally more room to get away with stuff like that.
I'm really interested in this, in teaching it to my defenders. The field is a lot more space. You're not often on top of somebody where you're going to be able to get away with some of that stuff. But when you're picking, like, let's say if you're like doing this, are you grabbing with potentially the bottom hand or the top hand?
Kind of
usually
both. Even.
Both? Okay.
Yeah, both, even.
Okay.
And the big thing is just your fingers. Like, you just got to realize you have these fingers here. You could easily just reach out and get yourself in position, and then you're good, let go, and you're good. Right? Don't grab the jersey. The stick can work sometimes, but the pads are what's, and you don't need to get a lot. You really don't. It's like 2 fingers and you just kind of hook it in there and hold for a second and then you're back.
I see what you're talking about now. If you hook the pads, when they pull away, it's not going to create that effect of like the jersey pull. As opposed to if you pull the jersey, the obviously as they pull away, the jersey's flailing. Okay. Man, I really like that. You can tell I'm more on the defensive side. I'm interested like football too, man. When I see guys, like they're holding all the time. The corners are always holding. Now, if it gets egregious, it's going to get called. But the little like slight tug to get them back in position, those are the things you're talking about.
Being competitive. Those guys are being competitive every single rep, right? They miss a drop step with their foot or the timing of it. They're reaching a hand out because they have access to that. Because what are athletes? Athletes are improvisers first and foremost, right? That's what they say, like athletes with ADHD are some of the best out there because they're able to process so many different things. So the more you can process, the more you can think, the more paranoid you can be, the better athlete you can be in general.
I've never heard that about ADHD athletes, but I'm going to take that and say that's what I had success with thinking all the time. But we're pretty late in the episodes, but let's try to fit in what we got here with the transition and substitution game and kind of, again, what we can transition with to field as well.
Yeah. Okay, so transition is the heartbeat of, box lacrosse, and I think really the biggest differentiator of the games. Because of the way that we're constantly subbing in box lacrosse, how quickly it needs to occur, how you set the offense or set the defense in the middle of transition, because there's not really yellow calls. You can slow down for a little bit, but like you only have so much time, so you have to get the offense started right away. So when we talk about transitioning the ball, like what are we looking to do first and foremost? We're looking to transition the ball up the opposite bench side. We never want to transition the ball up the bench side. I made that mistake one time. I got hit into the other team's bench, and it was like, yeah, I knew it was going to happen, right? It was like I knew I was in a bad spot, and I ended up in the bench. So transitioning on the off bench side is the most important aspect of this that you can take away, right? Getting the ball up and moving it out quickly. From there, you kind of have a million ways you can go about this, right? There's so many different ways that you can sub and set up these patterns to be effective. The biggest thing that you have to do, though, is you have to look at the 5 seconds before the transition. So I'll give you an example. We're on offense, okay? And you're defending me. I'm on offense. I'm at that, high righty shooter position, and I'm watching the shot clock tick down. I'm off ball. I'm away from the play, and I see a loose ball in the corner. If I go and challenge that loose ball in the corner from the high position, I'm now sacrificing my defensive end, right? So understanding where you are in the shot clock is going to help you position yourself better to be more efficient in the transition. And so I'm 36. I still play the game. And a lot of times in those situations for me, even though like I am, my number one thing was ground balls. Like you put a ball on the ground in front of me, I'm going to go get that. But now I'm 36. I'm not the young man on the team anymore, right? So with those 5 seconds left, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm just going to go sub. I'm going to get a defender on, and I'm just going to, play that conservative strategy. If I need to go get one, great, I'll go get one. But if you start to think about the game that way within those last 5 seconds, on offense, you can do it. But then on defense, you can start to create little breakaway opportunities for yourself just by, getting up the floor when your O guy doesn't want to go there. Because, O guys, some are going to do it, some are going to, whine about it. But if you can break out up the floor early, leak, as we call it, where you leak up the floor and you get a quick breakaway opportunity, those are really big IQ points that can add so much to your game.
I mean, there's so many things that we're talking about here that field players never get to experience. That little mental test of, hey, what do I do in this scenario? They never think through that kind of stuff. At most, they're getting off because they don't want to play defense, right? Mm-hmm. They're not thinking through, okay, if I can get off now, we can get another guy on, and that's happening while the ground ball is still going. That doesn't happen as much in field, and there's so many nuances that are awesome teaching moments for them. There's a lot of substitution advantages created in field. Obviously, do you see that? Are teams creating substitution goals from just transition?
In box?
Yeah, in box.
Yeah, so I think in order to have a really good box team, you need to be scoring, at least 20 to 30% of your goals. Maybe those are, I'm kind of just guessing off the top of my head, but when I think about in an 8-goal game, I'm going to want to see 2 to 3 goals in transition. Because if we're not able to get goals in transition and get started in transition, that 5-on-5 is super difficult to score, right? It's just so hard to break it down. And so if we can be more efficient in transition, we can give our team more of a chance to be successful. And if we can eliminate transition against, then we're really positioning ourselves for success.
That's the first thing I was looking at with sixes. I'm interested in the sixes game and the international play, and I was just trying to get my knowledge up on the whole thing. And I'm like, my first thing as a coach defensively would be, we have to stop breaks. It feels like if you can stop the breaks a good amount of times, then you put yourself in a good spot, even when you're playing against the best teams. But yeah, it just felt like there was transition happening every single play. And it's designed that way, so I get it. When you're talking about leaking, this was the question I wanted to go back to earlier. Is there any other things you're teaching from that defensive to offensive transition other than saying, let's leak up the field? When he's taking a shot, we want to do that, or right before or right after. What are the kind of nuances there of getting that transition going from the defensive to the offensive side?
Yeah. So 2 points on that. One's more of an individual skill, and then one is more like team concept. So when you're thinking about leaking as a defender, there's a couple different ways you can do it. One, you can do it when you're guarding the shooter. He sets his feet. you're in position, you're getting out to his stick, you're approaching, he shoots it around you, just take off and just leave and make him go back, right? It's going to bounce. It's either going in or it's bouncing around the glass, and you have a chance to kind of get that. You can also position yourself if you're on the backside, right? So you have a shooter, you're in that high backside position, take off. Another great time to do that is when you're on man down, right? Those two high guys, that's like mission critical. The high guy that's away from the bench side, he almost always has to be breaking out and leaving a little bit early because he's going to help us, facilitate that transition. But then the other point I wanted to talk about, which is so nuanced, I've never seen anybody else other than Shaden coach this, and I'm a huge believer in it, is the ability to go from scooping the ball up to your shoulder and then throwing with minimal or no cradles. Mm-hmm. And when you think about that, you're picking the ball up and you have to bring it to your shoulder and then throw. You're creating so much, there's so much feel that you need to have to be able to throw a really good pass in that moment. And I don't see enough players working on it, like plain and simple. It is such a staple to just be able to pick the ball up and throw it because when you're in youth, you got extra steps that you can take all the time. When you're playing field lacrosse, there's typically an extra step. There's a bailout where you can roll away and then you can throw the ball and, you can beat the defensive rotation or, getting the ball. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about box and transitioning that ball up the floor and you have an 8 to 10 second window to get it across the midline, picking that ball up and giving 1 or 2 cradles and then throwing it is the difference between you making it and not. And so I always stress, especially for my 1st through 5th graders, they do lots and lots of shooting drills where they just scoop the ball up and go right to the shoulder and shoot, and they have a cone right there, and they have to be able to do it in that shortened little window.
I love that. Let's go into that favorite drill and why, and then we can put it up on the screen for the folks listening here afterwards.
Yeah. So it is my favorite drill is a 3v2 to 2v1. So you work on coming on and off the bench in this, and you're working on transitioning from 3v2s and 2v1s and understanding your field positioning and all that stuff. So how the drill starts is you would have, let me think about how to set this. So say you have Team A. Team A sends 3 players out, and they get a pass from a goalie. So from their team's goalie, and he throws it up to them, or the goalie on their side. We get we have 2 defenders from Team B already down there on the floor in an I position. So we get a 3v2 break coming down into the net. And then as soon as a shot occurs or there's a change of possession, the high guy on offense on Team A drops back to defense. The 2 defenders on Team B push up in a 2-on-1 break. And the 2 additional players from Team A stay down and play defense now. So now you have a 2-on-1 break going the other way, and you're pushing. And then right after that break occurs, all 3 of those players are sprinting off to work on flipping the switch from D to O to get to the bench to get our new guys on. And then there's ways that you can vary that, and you can have Team A go against Team B entirely and do points. You can go 4v3 to 3v2, and there's millions of ways to do it, but that drill is almost, that, and there's other 2-on-1 drills. Those transition drills will change your game entirely. And you think how does running with a ball in the open field and attacking transition opportunities change my game? Well, it changes your game because you're becoming more confident in those transition situations, and then you're going to start to see the little 2-on-1s and 3-on-2s that are going to present themselves in both box and field, and you're going to be able to execute on them faster because you're going to have your spacing and positioning down.
Yeah, that spacing is super important. You see the guys start to understand it as they get older, get more reps, as opposed to just running together and maybe 5 yards apart. They start to space out and really test that defender. Yeah, I love that. Do you have a name for that drill?
3v2 to 2v1 transition?
3v. I love it. Yeah. I figure out an acronym. But
yeah, I can't do that. I'm not a name guy. I'm the worst at it. My name is literally the Box Lacrosse Guy. Come on, man. How simple is that? I'm a guy. I like lacrosse.
Very straightforward.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, this was a great lacrosse podcast, I should say then. I appreciate you, Elliot. Coach Bender, a great one. We'll have that drill. Hopefully we can get it in video form. If not, he did a great job explaining it. So I appreciate you guys joining in, listening to this episode. Elliot, we got to do this again sometime, man.
Man, just invite me on. I'll do it whenever.
Awesome.